So I'm super excited about this. This is one of the most important videos I have made in a long time. In this video, I'm going to be talking about my top 5 most underrated skills in motocross. And this is based on me training hundreds of people from all over the world. And I've also myself been coached by the best riders in my country. A lot of these things you may have heard in slightly different variations. So I'm also going to go through the usual tips that you have already heard before out here. And then I'm going to give you the alternative, a more nuanced, maybe more advanced way of understanding these things. And I'm going to give you some tips on how to execute it and make it happen and make it become a part of your own riding technique as well. Number 3, screwdriver grip is my number 3 most underrated skill. And the normal thing you have maybe heard is to overgrip the handlebars, and that's like the most freaking stupid advice I've ever heard. Instead of overgripping, you should screwdriver grip. And what does that mean? Well, it means gripping the grips as a screwdriver. So instead of gripping straight on like this, then you grip it as if you're going to turn a screwdriver on both sides. Okay? You may have heard to overgrip it, like gripping the handlebars like this, can help bring the elbows up. The reason it's really stupid to do that is, I don't know if you ever crashed a motocross bike from whiskey throttling or wheeling and then losing your balance towards the rear. But what happens is if you overgrip the throttle and you're riding rollers or whoops or anything where you're like lifting the front and riding on the back wheel, if you grip too much throttle, like overgrip too much, you will not be able to turn off the throttle if you start to lose your balance towards the rear. And you're just a passenger and you're gonna be unable to close the throttle. And you're just gonna flip the fucking bike and crash. I've tried that before on a 252 stroke in my younger days. And that is how I learned never to overgrip the handlebars or overgrip the throttle. Actually, a very basic skill of throttle operation is to always change your grip on the throttle, like the grip angle, to match your body position. That's another story, okay? So the reason for this is biologically or biomechanically, if you put your elbows out and then you point your fingers forward, then look at where your fingers are pointing. Well, they are pointing inwards. And then if you look at the angle of your hand, well, it's angled as if you were grabbing a screwdriver, like the handlebars are going in a 45-degree angle through your hand instead of like straight through your hand. The handlebar is gonna go like this through your hand, so to speak, or under your hand, okay? That's the biomechanical reason why it makes sense, okay? Now I have a tip on how to implement this in your own riding, and that is to move the controls, meaning the front brake and the clutch, move them inwards on your grips. You will also see some pros do this. For example, Blake Baggett. Try to move your controls inwards at least 1 inch, so that when you have your index fingers resting on the levers, or the levers, then they will actually point towards your front fender, and it will match that groove or that bend in the lever or lever automatically when you put your fingers on the levers with screwdriver grip, okay? So that was my number 3. Number 2, what I think is the second most underrated skill is to ride with tight core and 45 degrees straight back, like focusing on having a straight back. What you normally hear people talk about that's quite similar, or top coaches, is riding with your butt out or your hips out, and that's the old usual tips. But for 90% of riders in real life that are intermediate or entry level or maybe starting to be advanced riders, it's a lot more useful for your riding technique if you focus on having a tight core and managing the angle of your back. So it should be straight and 45 degrees when you're riding, instead of just sticking your butt out or trying to get your hips unlocked, because that will just create more instability and more unpredictability. And it's only on the very highest level that you can benefit from this, okay? That is just from what I've seen in my training of people. Now, let's get to the most important one. Number one, most underrated skill that I've not heard talked about as much as it should be online or on the internet with all coaches and general motocross coaching. And that is the ability of the rider to be centered on the bike, center balanced on the bike. And what you have normally heard maybe a lot of times is the simple explanation of always riding with your helmet above the handlebars of the bike, okay? And that's not necessarily wrong, okay? It might be right in many cases, but it's just a limited understanding of what it actually means to be in the correct body position. The correct and most simple universal understanding you can have of what the correct body position is and what it means to be centered on the bike is to always ride with a slight pressure, very small amount of pressure on pushing down into the grips with the palm of your hand instead of pulling the handlebars, okay? There's a huge difference in the outcome of your energy expenditure and how tired you get when you ride the bike, okay? So the most important thing actually about developing good riding body position and riding effortless and smooth and fast for many laps and winning races is to be centered on the bike. And the simplest way to explain what that is to spend most time of your riding with this gentle push down into the grips, okay? And to do that, you need really good balance into the foot pegs, and you need good throttle synchronization with your body balance, like back and forward on the bike, okay? So basically you need to learn how to get really good at balancing in the foot pegs and riding the bike more with your legs and less depending on the handlebars. So in other words, you need to try to ride the bike more independently of the handlebars and just give the bike, the handlebars, freedom to move around when you go over bumps and stuff. So instead of just thinking about having your helmet over the freaking handlebars, because when you're changing your acceleration and braking, your helmet is moving from in front of the handlebars to behind the handlebars, and maybe the average is above the handlebars. Yeah, that's right. But the only simple way to explain it correctly is you're trying to maintain a steady, small pressure with the palm of your hand onto the grips instead of pulling. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule. This rule does not apply for all parts of the track. Like whenever you need to charge over bumps or charge up a hill that's bumpy or whoops, you need to pull the handlebars, okay? So this is not a rule that applies for all the time, but for horizontal tracks and most track sections, by far, this is the correct understanding, most useful understanding of what it means to be centered on the bike. So that was number one, okay? As you could hear, I'm very excited to talk about these topics, and I hope you found something useful here for your own riding, and if so, give the video a like, and if you want to hear more or learn more, click subscribe. And I also made a video called the top 3 most overrated skills in motocross. You may want to check that out if I put a link up here. I'll do that if I remember it. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next one.